Welcome to 755 Live here at Ironworks Coffee on this Good Friday. About 5 minutes of what Jesus said, and you can find a different command of Jesus every weekday at the Today Church weekday Bible plan, 5 days a week, bible.today.church. Would encourage you to check that out and read the Bible with us. Today we are talking about what some call communion. The Last Supper, the Lord's Supper, where Jesus said, "Remember me together." That's the soundbite version of what we're going to read today. I'm going to be reading from Luke 22, but also a different perspective of this same encounter is in Matthew 26, verse 26 through 27. And in Luke 22:19 through 20, it's talking about this Passover week meal. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But in verse 19, then he took bread, and after giving thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, "This is my body, which do this in remembrance of me," or remember me by doing this. Verse 20, and in the same way, he took the cup after they had eaten, saying, "This cup that is poured out for you is the new covenant, the new promise in my blood." Now, this was the night before Good Friday, preparation day. We just had a Passover Seder last night. It was an incredible time. But this was not a Passover meal. This was a meal of preparation, so they were already eating unleavened bread. But had this been a Passover meal, the next day would have been a Sabbath, which we know that it wasn't because it was Good Friday and the Sabbath was following that. But that's not really the point today. The point is how Jesus said to remember me. And the together part of that is the context of what they were doing. Now, we call this sacrament, which is a fancy word that means that it's something that we think is a part of the foundation of our faith. And that is absolutely true. It's something that Jesus commanded us to do. Another word that we use for this meal together of the wine, we use grape juice in most traditions, and the unleavened bread, we call that communion. Well, the actual definition of communion is very interesting because the first definition is an act or instance of sharing. And that's a point that many times we miss about this ritual. In some traditions, this breaking of bread and drinking from the cup is performed with fancy things. And there's nothing really wrong with that. I mean, there's a lot of times shiny gold or silver cups, custom-made plates, and little fancy glasses or custom-made wafers. And then also in some traditions, it's really kind of become all about convenience. Those little plastic containers that are hard to open, that have that drop or two of juice that you wonder how long it's been there, and then some little round something that tastes like styrofoam. It's not really the way that we do it, but have we missed the point of why? What we're really remembering together. When we look back at this night in Jesus' life, this night wasn't very shiny. Just think about it. It was actually a bunch of homeless guys who traveled from place to place, all cooped up in this little room. And it probably wasn't the best smelling environment. And they didn't even stop to wash their feet, which was a tradition at that time, because no one wanted to be a servant and do that, and there wasn't a servant available. So the disciples wouldn't do it. So Jesus did. He washed their feet. And we sometimes forget that Jesus didn't just break the bread, he served them. He gave it to them. Just imagine that, the King of all creation. Here he is about to give his very life for the entire world, and yet he's passing out bread like a waiter or a waitress as a servant. Paul talks about how this meal should function within the church in 1 Corinthians 11, 20 through 21. And he says, now when you come together at the same place, you're not really eating the Lord's Supper, for when it's time to eat, everyone just proceeds with his own supper. One's hungry and another one becomes drunk. And then Paul reminds them of the actual night, of what it's really about. Jesus saying, do this, remembering me. But he drives home this point in 1 Corinthians 11:33. So then, my brothers and sisters, when you come together to eat, wait for one another. Communion isn't about being served. It's about serving, sharing, waiting on one another. Because we remember, as Jesus said in Matthew 20:28, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. So when we do this ritual, when we practice communion, let's remember what it's about. Let's remember Jesus, not just in the ritual, but actually in whatever we do, by serving, by sharing, by remembering that's what Jesus did. Jesus said, remember me together, as he served those who didn't deserve it. How can we put that into action